Paper Mario can be beaten without collecting a single star spirit. That's right, a game that normally requires collecting all 7 star spirits to beat can be beaten with 0. But doing this involves pulling off some precise and crazy glitches, and I do mean crazy, and I'm going to break it all down in this video. I'm Ty from Press A, and this is beating Paper Mario with 0 star spirits. If you've never played Paper Mario, or you need a refresher, then essentially you need to rescue the 7 star spirits, a group of star spirits who you might also know from Mario Party 5 that need to be rescued in order to reclaim the Star Rod and defeat Bowser. That's the game's developer's intention on how to beat the game, but that's not ours, because today we'll be beating Paper Mario without collecting a single star spirit. How is this possible, you might ask? Well, it starts with getting through the prologue, the beginning of which includes a series of cutscenes until you wake up in Goomba Village after being defeated by Bowser. I don't know why, but waking up in this room reminds me of waking up as Link in the beginning of Ocarina of Time. It's in Goomba Village that Mario learns basic fighting skills, gets his first partner in Goombario, gets the hammer, and fights the annoying junior trooper for the first time. But this fight can be skipped using a glitch known as Loading Zone Storage, or LZS for short. Loading Zone Storage refers to a property of the loading zones that connects rooms and areas in Paper Mario. A loading zone can be something like a door, pipe, or in this case, the edge of the screen. In Paper Mario, Mario will take a loading zone if he's on the ground for 2 consecutive frames. But if we instead jump frame perfectly in the loading zone so that Mario is only on the ground for 1 frame, we can store the loading zone. And as long as we never touch the ground for more than 1 frame, we can move anywhere with the loading zone stored, through what are called loading zone storage jumps, and change the location where Mario takes the loading zone once we stay on the ground for 2 frames. Normally, we would walk to this bush here to grab the hammer, and then when attempting to leave the area, the cutscene with Junior Trooper is triggered and the fight starts. But by storing the loading zone here, we can jump frame perfectly to the bush and use the 1 frame to interact with the bush before the stored loading zone takes Mario, which immediately gives Mario the hammer. It's so immediate that we don't get to see the hammer come out of the bush. But when we are loaded into the next area, Mario now has the hammer, and the Junior Trooper fight has been skipped. It might not seem that impressive until you remember that Paper Mario runs at 30 frames per second, and so every frame perfect jump means pressing A on 1/30th of a second. Not only that, but you need to move the control stick in the direction you want to go. But you can't just hold the control stick, as that will cause Mario to walk, which results in a second frame to happen, and so the skip will fail. So you have to move the control stick in whatever direction and return it to neutral, while jumping, all in 1 frame, multiple times consecutively to get the hammer and skip the Junior Trooper fight. Now that we have the hammer and our first partner, we can leave Goomba Village and head to Toad Town, taking out the Goomba Bros and King Goomba on the way. Toad Town connects to Shooting Star Summit, where we're supposed to go up to meet manifestations of the Star Spirits. But we don't care about the Star Spirits, so instead of walking Mario's ass up the mountain, we're going to stay in Toad Town and perform what's called the Lucky Star Skip. On the very east end of Toad Town is this group of black toads that are blocking the path leading to Chapter 1. The twist is, they're not actually toads, they are the Koopa Bros in disguise. And getting them to unblock the path would involve going up Shooting Star Summit, getting the Lucky Star from Twink, and hooking up with a local fortune teller named Merlon. But we can skip all of that using a glitch called NPC clipping. NPC stands for non-playable character, in case you didn't know. If we spin between an NPC and a wall, and then hammer at a very precise time, we can get Mario to clip through walls and out of bounds, which we can do here with this green toad by the post office. This works because when Mario uses the hammer, he loses all collision, and so he's able to get out of bounds. From here, we can move forward further out of bounds, and then let go of the control stick after falling, which drops Mario in the post office flower box. In a situation like this, where Mario is falling, after about 1,000 units, the game assumes Mario has been falling for a while, and that he must be out of bounds. And so, to get Mario back in bounds, the game will shoot him back up the air to try and have Mario land somewhere back in bounds, which in this case is the flower box. Doing this requires being in a specific spot, otherwise when falling out of bounds, the game will put us back in bounds instead of in the flower box. This next part is the hard part of the skip. We then need to spin buffer, which allows Mario to maintain higher speed, jump into the post office due to there being no collision here, and then roll the control stick in a series of specific movements to get Mario around falling back in bounds and over to the other side of the black toads. It looks funny and confusing, but a lot of the tricks used in Paper Mario utilize this falling mechanic to get out of bounds in one place and back in bounds in another. In Chapter 1, getting into the Koopa Bros fortress would require going to Koopa Village, getting back Kooper's shell from a group of fuzzies, having Cooper become a partner, and using Cooper to reach the fortress. Naturally, we're going to skip all of that, and use a skip called Cooper Skip to reach the fortress without needing Cooper. I have to emphasize that this is a very hard skip to pull off. For the longest time, it was only possible in Taz, and as of this video, only 6 people have pulled off this trick in RTA. It involves loading zone storage, as we need to cross over the loading zone here to get out of bounds, and then jumping out of bounds multiple times, which looks similar to the Lucky Star skip, until we reach the loading zone on the other side, bypassing the need to use the bridge. But what makes this skip a lot more difficult is that unlike Junior Skip, where you can see when you need to jump, you're completely blind here, as Mario will land back in bounds before the camera pans to him. Remember, loading zone storage requires frame-perfect jumps, otherwise the loading zone will take Mario, and so for this skip, that means jumping frame-perfectly blind, multiple times, while also being very precise with the stick at certain times. Messing up even once would mean Mario takes the loading zone back to the area before and having to try the skip again. I had reached out to a player named Rain about this skip, as they were the main advocate for putting the skip in runs, and they said it took them 20 hours of trying before executing the skip once. Once in the fortress, we need to make our way into the staircase room, where the next skip we'll see is the staircase skip. This is an out-of-bounds trick used to partner up with Bombette a lot quicker than intended. Normally in this room, we would need to defeat the Koopa enemy to reveal Blue Switch, which we'd then need to hit to lower the stairs that lead to the other sections of the fortress that we would need to complete before meeting Bombette. Instead, at the top of the staircase, we can position Mario in a specific spot and then jump down between the stairs and the fence. It's not a straight drop down, however, and so we'll need to tap down, up, and down again, quickly one after another, so that Mario weaves between the staircase and fences and lands here on this seam. This is the room where the staircase is supposed to take us after hitting the blue switch, and since the developers never anticipated we'd be down here without the staircase, we see this pit filled with what looks like fog that we can jump down. We'll want to jump right and then immediately switch to upright, which will cause Mario to move up and land in the loading zone behind the top door. Except, the loading zone doesn't take Mario. In some games like Ocarina of Time, you can take the loading zone if clipping behind a door, but in Paper Mario, you need to interact with the door in order to take the loading zone. And so we need to walk back inbounds and then open the door. In the next room, we make our way up to here and hit this question mark block, which causes Mario to fall down a trapdoor and into a prison full of bombs, one of which is Bombette. Since we're not collecting any star spirits, getting Bombette was the only reason we needed to enter the fortress. Now that we have her, we can leave the fortress and backtrack to Toad Town. There's another part of Toad Town that we need to go to, except it's blocked by this pile of logs, which are only removed after defeating the Koopa Bros and collecting the first star spirit, and thus completing Chapter 1. Since we're not doing any of that, we'll have to perform what is called Log Skip, an out-of-bounds trick to get around the logs. First, we need to get out of bounds, which we can do here in Rof's Bad Shop. When we knock down this carpet, this will trigger Rof, the shopper owner, to walk over to pick it up. When Rof begins to walk into Mario, while holding left, we'll need to do 2 full jumps, hammer, then jump left, which will allow Mario to NPC clip out of bounds. Next, we need to line Mario up in a specific spot on the edge of the map here. The visual cue for getting Mario in the correct spot is lining up the M on Mario's hat with the emblem on the sign in front of Merlon's house. And an easy way to get Mario on the edge of the map is falling out of bounds and respawning. Now, before continuing, we need to talk about loading zones again, as loading zone storage will be used again in this skip. But loading zones have 2 other important properties I haven't mentioned yet. Loading zones in Paper Mario use Mario's entrance position when taking a loading zone to determine what angle Mario enters the next room from. For example, when entering the loading zone here on the left side, Mario walks towards the center when taking the loading zone and continues into the next room walking in that direction. Loading zones also extend infinitely upwards and downwards, meaning we don't have to be on the ground to store a loading zone. Instead, we can be above it and store it. And players have found a way to exploit these loading zone properties to get around the logs. While in this spot, we want to have Mario fall at a very specific angle, which is slightly down, down right. To buffer this angle, it's recommended to pull up the partner menu, which allows us to get the control stick at the angle we need without moving. And then once Mario is falling, it's a series of control stick angle changes using the bulb in the back, camera shifts, and Mario reappearing on screen as visual cues for changing the control stick angle that looks like this. It's hard to follow what is happening, but what we're essentially doing is getting Mario right enough to store the loading zone while above it, then back to the far left where Mario will land back in bounds in a similar spot to where we clipped out of bounds, and then take the loading zone. And because we're taking the loading zone so far from where the loading zone actually is, when Mario respawns in the next area, the game will extend how angled Mario is coming into the area, So much that he immediately falls out of bounds and respawns on the other side of the log. Once on the other side of the logs, we head to this blue house, which is locked from the inside. On the inside is a pipe connecting to the sewers of Toad Town. Normally, we'd have to wait until Chapter 5, when we get Sushi as a partner, before we can get inside this house. But as you probably know, we can get into this house now, using a trick called the Blue House Skip. There are a few methods of performing this trick that involve either loading zone storage or interacting with an NPC, but the fastest, most common method is the jump method. When standing in this spot next to the Toad, which you'll know is the correct spot if Mario's hammer appears behind the Toad, we can spin buffer and then essentially jump our way up the side and into the house. Angled walls in Paper Mario can act like floors, which is why we can jump up here, but the wall of this house will try and push us off. So for this skip, we only have one frame to perform the second jump off the wall and onto the roof, which we can drop through. That's because the game only checks to make sure we can't go up and through ceilings from below, but doesn't check from above. Now that we're in the blue house, this is our view, just the side of the house. Because we didn't enter the house the way the game intended, we're left to find the pipe that leads to the sewers blind. A good strategy for finding the pipe is walking over to the top left corner of the house where there is a key, and then once the key is collected, that's our cue to hold down right and jump into the pipe, which takes us into this room in the sewers. This is a unique room, because we were never intended to be in this room unless this wall on the left was blasted open with bombette from the other side. But for whatever reason, the developers decided to leave in a trigger that lets us blow up the wall from this side, which is not the case everywhere. If it wasn't for this oversight from the developers, this would likely be the end of our 0-star spirit adventure. Because once we continue through the sewers, and after defeating this blooper mini-boss, we get access to Chapter 5, without ever seeing Chapters 2, 3, or 4. Now, we're in Yoshi's Village, and next, we want to get into the volcano up ahead. Doing this would require saving Colorado in the jungle, going back to Yoshi Village to find the children are missing, having Sushi join the party, and then going around finding all the missing children. It's a lot, and so naturally, players have found a way to skip all of it, using a trick called Raphael Skip, or Tree Hop. It starts with this palm tree. By lining up with the bush in front of the tree, we can tap jump, which just means jumping while neutral, and land on a seam on the left edge of the tree. The palm tree is angled like the blue house from earlier, which means the game treats it like a floor at the right distance. We can then continue tap jumping until Mario's hat is visible above both vines, and then jump over the tree and land out of bounds. Speedrunners make this look easy, but I can assure you, it's not. Here, we can jump further out of bounds and then have the game shoot us back in bounds, like skips before, and do this a couple more times to get Mario across the lava where we can then simply walk into the volcano. It's here in the volcano that things get complicated. After killing the spike top, next we need to get what is called save block storage. We can do this by falling down right off the edge of the ledge here by the save block and hitting the spring. Doing this puts Mario in a weird state where he can soft lock pretty easily. Once Mario bounces back up, we'll need to pause, unpause, and then during the unpause, press C down to have Goombario talk to Mario. If done correctly, Goombario's text box will come up while Mario is still able to move around. From this point, we can jump up to hit the save block, and once Goombario's text box is finished, we can move around with the save block text still up on the screen. We'll then need to make our way to the top left corner of the top stair, making sure we don't close the text box. To avoid closing the text box, anytime we scroll the text by pressing A or B, we can press Z to scroll the text back to the beginning. After that, it's a series of very precise movements to set up Mario in a specific position, where we then need to get hit by another spike top, close the text box while in the fight, and then after killing the spike top, open the partner menu quickly enough so that we're able to move with it up. After that, we can store the correct amount of whatever Matrix effects are, which will be used to cause a buffer overflow. That's right, what we're seeing is part of the setup for our good friend ACE, which stands for Arbitrary Code Execution. It's quite complicated and difficult to understand, at least for me, but I promise I'll explain it in a way that's easy to understand. ACE is a common speedrunning strategy where the setups look different in different games. For example, in Super Mario Sunshine, part of the A setup looks like the Cha-Cha Slide. In Paper Mario, part of the A setup looks like this to get Mario in a specific position, but the beginning of the setup actually starts before we even start the game. It starts with the game's file names, which need to be precisely as shown. And yes, that means you best be playing the Japanese version of the game. The fourth file can be named anything, and it's this file we'll need to play on. There also needs to be a second controller plugged into the player 3 spot with these exact inputs. which players do using elastics. It's all legal and there's a tutorial video on how to do it. But yeah, this A setup requires a second controller and elastics. The rest of the setup takes place in Chapter 5 in the volcano, which we covered up to this point. And then from here, it's just one final position setup, closing the partner menu, and then jumping within an 8-frame window to have the game jump code execution to our position data, which jumps execution to the player 3 inputs, which jumps execution to the file names, which updates Mario's current room to the end before saving. The game will then crash, but after resetting and reloading the file, we warp to the credits. So what's happening? Well, ACE is the action of executing code or instructions, like warping to the end credits, in the game's memory, and then triggering a glitch that tells the game to follow these instructions. We of course can't use a keyboard to write this code or instructions, so instead, we use the coordinates of Mario's position, the inputs of the controller plugged into the player 3 spot, and the specific file names to write the code, and then use the effects of the save block storage glitch to trigger ACE. Still with me? Well, here's an analogy. Think of the game like a train on rails. The game starts on a track, but next to it, we build our own custom track. The code we wrote is the custom built track, and the glitch is us flipping the lever. Instead of following the story rails, the game veers off and rides the track we built straight to the credits, or off a cliff. What I love about ACE is that it looks completely different in different games, and in the case of Paper Mario, there is another ACE method that is even crazier than this one, and it requires the help of another game. Yes, in case you didn't already know, The Legend of Zelda or Ocarina of Time can be used to execute ACE in Paper Mario. And this method was discovered even earlier. It starts by using a glitch known as Stale Reference Manipulation, or SRM for short. How it works is anytime Link picks up an object, like a rock, the game will save a reference to wherever the data for that object is located in the game's memory. But if we delete an object while it's still being referenced, the game tries to access a now freed memory region, allowing us to manipulate that region with Link's position to control what is accessed and where it points. Here's another analogy. Imagine we're in a classroom and we're holding a sticky note with our friend's locker number on it. Now let's say the locker is moved away and something else is put in its place, like a soda machine. We can still use the same sticky note, even though it no longer points to a locker. But now when we go to open the locker, we're actually messing with the soda machine, even though that was never supposed to happen. That's SMR in a nutshell, tricking the game into accessing something it wasn't supposed to do. In Ocarina of Time, SRM is used to put a piece of code on the N64's expansion pack. Once that's done, we need to turn the system off, quickly swap games, and power back up the system, all within a few second window before the expansion pack RAM resets. Early editions of the N64 hardware have a quirk where the memory persists for a few seconds after the system powers down, which is why we can even do this in the first place. And fun fact, it was this quirk that was the key to Rare's plans for their own stop and swap mechanic, where players would have to swap Banjo-Kazooie and Tooie cartridges to unlock items in Banjo-Kazooie. But Rare was forced to ultimately scrap those plans, as later revisions of the N64 hardware got rid of the unintended memory persistence. But the other reason why this crazy method works is, unlike other games like Majora's Mask and Donkey Kong 64 that require the extra megabytes of memory in the expansion pack, Paper Mario doesn't, and because of that, the game never clears the memory in the expansion pack. So the code we put on the expansion pack while playing Ocarina of Time carries over into Paper Mario, where next we just need to complete a glitch to run the code on the pack, which, like the other method, warps us to the end credits. The A setup in this method starts after defeating the Goomba King, by using a trick known as Refight Goomba King, which is exactly how it sounds. By interacting with the bush aside of the castle and opening the item menu and eating an item at the same time, if timed correctly, the blue switch that comes flying out of the bush will still have a battle hitbox attached to it, which triggers the battle against the Goomba King again. After this, and after defeating the Goomba King for a second time, we have control of Mario after the battle ends much faster than normal, which is needed for a glitch called Effects Overflow, the main glitch that executes the code we wrote in the expansion pack. Paper Mario has different effects, which can be things like trails behind shooting stars to the dust from running or hammering. Effects Overflow occurs when the queue that stores effects becomes full and overflows in other parts of the memory. It's quite technical, but for this setup, it looks like this. Hammering the floor 75 times in a row, walking to this tree, making sure not to run so as to not trigger a dust effect, walk up and then walk down, which turns off an animation flag that would normally cause a crashing instruction, and then wait here for exactly 69 seconds. Yes, I know. We have to wait because there's a timer in memory that we can run as code, and waiting for 69 seconds will produce a jump instruction that will jump execution to the expansion pack that then jumps execution to the Paper Mario file names, just like the first method covered in this video, as it's the file names that correspond to code that we can run to change Mario's room value. After 69 seconds, we then need to jump, which crashes the game, but upon restarting and selecting the file, the end credits roll. Now, if you're wondering, what the fuck, and how people figure this shit out, then you're not alone. And I wish I could tell you, but I'm not smart enough to understand it. All I know is these A setups are figured out by very dedicated players who study in depth the mechanics of these games we love so much, and discover how truly broken they are. But yeah, that's 2 ways of beating Paper Mario without any star spirit. One with the help of Ocarina of Time, and one with Paper Mario on its own. Before closing this off, I want to give a huge shout out to JTown2909, the current world record holder in both these ace runs, and Rain, who developed the Cooper skip and discovered 90% of the ace route, for helping me with this video, as well as to Jcog, one of the biggest players in the Paper Mario speedrunning community, whose tutorial videos were a huge help and resource. I've linked those in the description, in case you want to learn and try any of these skips or glitches yourself, though I'm not sure why you'd want to. Just a reminder that by becoming a Press A member or Patreon, you get access to the monthly Pikmin Hunger Games, where you will be a Pikmin in a chaotic situation in hopes of being the last one standing. And with that, I want to thank Clone Trooper Wheeler, Serena Bliss, Nice Gamer Musics, Young Smoky VP17, Puddles Megan, Burb, Rebecca Lyons, Real Backfish, Texas_14, Yellow Pikmin are the best Pikmin, and Blue Pikmin is the best Pikmin, and if you say otherwise, then Louie will eat your soul. Also, this is a completely real name.